and welcome to the sew along for the Olivet Dress and Blouse, a beginner-friendly, super cute, as well as free PDF pattern. Hi, I'm Maddie from Madalynne Intimates, and we do everything DIY lingerie, as well as activewear, swimwear, and corsets. DIY kits, online classes, in-person classes, retreats, tutorials just like this one, private lessons, even frock tails. And we do all of those things on all of our social media channels: Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If you follow Madalynne, then you know that lingerie is my jam. Any lingerie project is a challenging but also fun DIY. And sometimes you just want something super quick, a super easy DIY project, or something to wear over your lingerie. That is the Olivet. It can be a dress or a blouse. It has gathered oversized sleeves that you can showcase a scalloped edge. But if you don't have a fabric with a scalloped edge and you want to do a fun play on patterns, such as the stripes going in one direction for the dress and the stripes going in the other direction for the sleeves, you can do that as well. No matter your purpose for sewing the Olivet, it is the type of project you can whip up regardless of your sewing skills. Jumping right into the sew along, let's go over what you should have cut out, what trims you should have, and what you should have prepped prior to sewing. The first is the front bodice, and this is the main fabric. The back bodice should also be the main fabric. Next up is the sleeve ruffle, and it should be a combo fabric. And all combo fabric means is that it is a fabric that goes with the main fabric. Now, the thing about this sleeve ruffle is that it can be cut on the fold, or it can be not cut on the fold. Getting an eyelet fabric like this might be difficult with a scalloped edge, and if you don't have that, or if you want to do a play on pattern, such as having the stripes going in one direction for the dress and then having the stripes going the other direction for the sleeve, you can put that sleeve ruffle on the fold. So that is going to be optional. Since I am using an eyelet, this is just a single layer of the eyelet that is not cut on the fold. The skirt, also a main fabric, but this could be a contrast fabric if you want to do some color blocking. Now let's move on to what trims you should have. There's only one trim that you should have for the Olivet dress, and that is a picot or a rubber elastic. Picot elastic is definitely easier to find, especially if you follow Madalynne, you have a lot of bra making supplies. The thing about picot elastic is that when you sew it onto that bodice seam, it tends to stretch out when you're sewing, so you want something a little bit sturdier, such as a rubber elastic. Now, if you can't get a rubber elastic and you can only use a picot elastic, I suggest cutting your elastic a little bit smaller to account for it stretching out during sewing. So the last thing is the binding. They are already pieced together, sewed together, and there are instructions on how to do that in the PDF pattern, and then pressed it with this awesome binding maker, which we love and use all the time. I'll provide a link for this. First up is to sew the front bodice to the back bodice at the shoulder seam and the side seam. You're going to use a straight stitch, back stitch at beginning to end, and you can serge it. The seam allowances if you have a serger. If not, you can use pinking shears or use whatever method you usually use to finish your seam allowances. Now, if you follow Madalynne, you're probably used to 1/4 inch seam allowances for lingerie, but I do want to call out that it's 1/2 inch seam allowance because it is outerwear. Front bodice has been sewn to back bodice at the shoulder seam and the side seam. The next step is to attach the binding at the armholes. I will call out that you could, if you think it's easier, everybody has their own sewing method and what they prefer to do. You could not sew the side seam and sew the binding on first, then sew the side seam, or you can sew the side seam and put the binding on in the round. Whatever is easier for you. Now, when it comes to bias binding, again, everybody has their own sewing methods and preferences. So you might like to sew it in one or in two steps as far as you sew it. You sew the binding one way and then you flip it to the other way and then do the stitch in the ditch so that there's no stitching. Or you might just want to sew it in one pass and overlap it. Whatever is easier for you. The next step is to sew the sleeve ruffle together at the shoulder seam, then add the basting stitch. After that has been done, then you will gather the sleeve ruffle so that this length on the sleeve ruffle matches the length of the neckline. It's hard to lay it flat, but basically the front, this whole length right here should match the length of the sleeve ruffle. Once the sleeve ruffle has been gathered to the same length as the neckline, then you will pin the sleeve ruffle, the right side of the sleeve ruffle to the wrong side of the bodice. Once the sleeve ruffle is pinned to the neckline on the bodice, then you will sew them together with a straight stitch, back stitch at beginning and the end. Sleeve ruffle is attached to the bodice. If you want to sew an edge stitch, you can, but since you're flipping this to the right side, it kind of is optional. It's not necessary, but if you're used to edge stitching, by all means, go ahead and edge stitch. Then you will pin along the neckline edge and sew a top stitch a 1/2 inch away from the neckline edge. This just helps to keep the sleeve ruffle from staying on top and from flip-flopping in either direction. Top stitch has been sewn to the sleeve ruffle. Now the next step is to attach the skirt. So I went ahead and I sewed the skirt panels together, the front to the back, also hemmed it, and also added a basting stitch at the top edge. And the basting stitch goes from the center front to the center back. Now I think it is very helpful to pin the skirt pin the side seams of the skirt to the side seams of the bodice. Then pin the center front of the skirts to the center front of the bodice. Then gather in between. That is what I recommend to get even gathers, so that one portion is not gathered more than the other. Once the skirt has been gathered to fit into the bodice, then I will go back and repin it and sew them together. is sewn to dress. The next step is to attach the elastic along the bodice seam. Before we do that, I want to note that this is a very loose fitting dress. And if you want to keep it as a loose fitting dress, let's just say as like a beach cover up, you can just keep it as is and just finish those seam allowances. But if you want it to be a little bit more tight fitting on your rib cage, there are a couple options to sew the elastic to the bodice seam. One is that you can measure from center front to center back and then reduce it by a certain amount. The pattern has some percentages. Obviously, the more that you undercut it, the tighter it's going to be on your rib cage. Or you can just take your rubber elastic or whatever elastic that you're using and wrap it around your rib cage, and that's how much you will reduce it. So whatever you want to do. Now you can sew this with a zigzag stitch. You can also sew this with a serge. I'm going to do it with a serge just because I think it's a lot easier. So as I'm underneath that serger, I'm just pulling the elastic. The Olivet dress is finished. This super easy, free PDF pattern. Hopefully you enjoyed this sew along. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the comments below or to email hello@madalynne.com.